All right, we'll get started then. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for coming out. Thanks to the Devil's Gate History Club for having me. Um, yeah, especially on a day like today, I know. Thanks for coming out. The mushrooms, at least, though, will be happy for the moisture. So that's the silver lining. So yeah, I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself. My mushroom story began in 2021, actually. I was living in Chicago, and my friend took me morel hunting, which it's actually right about that time now. They should start popping up, especially with this recent moisture. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But my friend took me morel hunting, and we went out to the suburbs of Chicago, and we found 3 whole morels. But I considered it a success. That was the first wild mushroom I ever cooked and ate, and it was delicious, and from that moment I was hooked. And so the next year I moved back here to Colorado and immediately got involved with the Colorado Mycological Society, and just really getting involved with it. And to this day I lead forays and help organize other events, and I volunteer at the Denver Botanic Gardens, has a close relationship with the Mycological Society. But at first I didn't realize, but Colorado actually has a really, really long and rich history with mushrooms and mycology. So tonight, of course, I'll be talking about mushrooms and fungi, but I'll also be discussing how humans and people in Colorado have interacted with mushrooms and fungi throughout the years, whether that's in a cultural or scientific context or as a food source. And so I hope you learned something from this presentation. So first, just a little bit to cover the basics of mushrooms and fungi. What are they exactly? So fungi is, kingdom fungi is its own distinct branch on the tree of life here, just as animals and plants are. And kingdom fungi is just as diverse as the animal or plant kingdoms, if not more. And so if you're imagining mushrooms, they are, of course, in kingdom fungi, but kingdom fungi actually comprises a lot more than that too. So some examples: Agaricus bisporus, that is a common portobello or a button mushroom you might find in the grocery store. They also occur in the wild here. So here's a nice example of some naturally occurring Agaricus bisporus in Colorado. Yeasts also are in kingdom fungi. Here's a picture of a yeast under a microscope. And molds and lichens are also all in kingdom fungi. And so when people talk about mushrooms, they're usually referring to what is called the fruiting body of the fungal organism. And here's an example of mushrooms growing on a substrate here. And the majority of the actual fungal organism is in the soil, or sometimes it's wood. But this is the mycelium, and that actually is the fungal organism. And when the conditions are right for the organism to reproduce, that's when it sends up mushrooms above ground, and the mushrooms release spores. And in that way, the fungal organism can reproduce. So now that we've kind of covered the basics of mushrooms and what they are, and fungi, here's a little bit about the mushrooms and fungi that are more specific to Colorado. And to give you a sense of the diversity present in Colorado, these are actually all photos I've taken of mushrooms. Most of these are in Clear Creek County. A few of them are elsewhere in Colorado, but these are all in Colorado. So as you can see, just a huge amount of diversity in shapes and colors. We're really quite blessed to have such diversity, and a large part of that is due to the diversity of habitats and ecologies we have in the state. Which of course is due to the mountains. So Colorado is, of course, it's the Rocky Mountains, and we are in the southern end of the Rockies. So we're in the southern Rockies. The Rockies extend all the way up to Canada, and we're in the southern Rockies, and you can see sort of the diversity of habitats and the differences. A lot of it corresponds to altitude, so as you go up or down, it gets different. Different trees have relationships with different mushrooms and different fungi. So, as I said, we're really blessed with such a diversity of habitats to give us such a diversity of mushrooms. So that's a little bit about mushrooms and mushrooms in Colorado. And so now I will start to go into kind of the history, starting with the early history of mushrooms in Colorado. The state of Colorado is a modern political invention with the boundaries of the territory that we know as the state of Colorado. But for much of history, this land was actually home to many different groups and nations of indigenous people and Native Americans. For example, the Pueblo, the Ute, Apache, Comanche, Arapaho, Diné, or Navajo. So here's just a map showing some of the extents of their territories. So you can see different trade networks and different territories on what we now consider Colorado. And each of these indigenous groups had their own relationships with the land and with, therefore, the mushrooms as well. Evidence of Native American settlements and migrations in Colorado actually extends back over 37,000 years. And as you can imagine, fungal archaeology is a little bit more difficult than archaeology involving pottery or bones or things that are hardier than that, because mushrooms really don't last very long. They're very ephemeral by nature, and they rot easily and quickly. So the evidence and documentation is sparse, but we do have some evidence and documentation. So for example, various indigenous groups use various lichens. For example, this Cladonia lichen for various medicinal purposes. Very many groups used various puffballs for a wide range of uses. Here's an example of some puffballs. They were used for wound dressings, and they were consumed. They're edible. Used for ceremonial purposes. Some Pueblo groups may have even believed puffballs could cause blindness. And let's see, this fungus here is called Endothea singularius. It occurs on Gamble oak, which is not so common in Clear Creek County, but mostly in southern Colorado, it's a little bit more common. But this was used. There's evidence that this was used by Navajo people for dyeing fabrics and other artistic and ceremonial uses. Mycosarcoma matus, or corn smut, also called like huitlacoche in Mexico especially, is widely consumed throughout the Southwest and was for many hundreds of years, comprised a major component of the diet of many indigenous groups in Southwest United States. It's of course still eaten today. It's delicious actually. It may not look it, but it is really delicious. It's also been documented to have been used for body paint and pigments. And then the sand mushroom, Tricholoma populinum. This is a photo I took actually just in Empire. These were and are still gathered by Taos Pueblo as food source. Here are a couple examples of Native American art incorporating possible mushrooms in the design. So here is a Ute charm from around 1890, kind of alluding to the shape of a mushroom. It may have also had something to do with peyote. And then here's a Pueblo bowl from the 600 or 750 AD with some possible mushroom designs throughout the bowl. And then as European settlers moved to Colorado, they settled in Colorado, some of them noticed, some of these rock formations and like these hoodoos, and of course this shape, as I'm sure it would today too, but back then it evoked mushrooms. So these are some postcards from the early 1900s showing this rock formation they call giant mushroom. This is in Garden of the Gods. This group of three rocks here, toad and toadstools in Mushroom Park, Garden of the Gods. The entire section of Garden of the Gods they named Mushroom Park. And then, like I said, these hoodoos, obviously kind of mushroom shaped. So clearly, people from a long time ago, over 100 years ago, had mushrooms on the mind here in Colorado. And continue with that theme, these are some artifacts from the late 19th century and early 20th century. This book here is 1,000 American Fungi. This was found in the historic Byers Evans house in Denver around 1902. This floor plan here, even older, from 1885 to 1893. This is a drawing of a floor plan of a residence in Denver, but someone actually sketched a mushroom onto it too. Right there in the blueprint. Hopefully after it was already built. And then, yeah. And then here is a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream at CU Boulder around 1919. And here's someone dressed as Puck sitting on a toadstool. Broadly speaking, mushrooms were not really widely consumed by, European settlers and the descendants of European settlers in America until about 1902, when mushrooms were kind of brought from France, and people in the U.S. learned cultivation techniques, and then they became kind of a delicacy. So, capitalizing on this burgeoning culinary interest, a man named Charles William Savory established the Savory Mushroom Farm in 1923 in Westminster. So here's some photographs of the farm and some of the operations, some of the grow houses, and some of the manure which they use as substrate. In fact, he had to move the farm at one point. It was in downtown Denver, but people complained of the smell from the manure, so he had to move outside of Denver. This was actually a really successful mushroom farm. Savory ended up, he opened facilities in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Missouri. And at the peak, they were producing combined about 10,000 pounds of mushrooms every day. And this farm in Westminster was the only mushroom facility reportedly to be found between Kansas City and the Pacific Coast. And here, a couple more photographs from the operation. So here's a man inspecting the mushrooms in one of the beds they had growing. It's quite likely they probably grew basically the button mushroom, portobello mushroom. The scientific name is Agaricus bisporus. And they would, pick them and clean them, and a majority of them ended up in cans and shipped all over the U.S. And the can actually ended up being kind of iconic, so much so that they erected a water tower on the property and painted it and designed it to look just like the can. And so here is Savory himself under his Savory mushroom water tower. And you can still see the water tower. It's still in Westminster. Here's a recent photo of it. Here's roughly where it is. There's also a mushroom pond. There's a trail that goes around there, and this pond supplied most of the water for the farm operations. You can walk around there. You can see the water tower. Although the farm itself closed in 1953 after Savory retired. Just a few more of my photos of mushrooms. Actually, I'll just note these are kind of cool. These are called snowbank fungi. It's a broad category of mushrooms. These are a type of snowbank fungi, and they'll start popping up now. They grow right at the edge of snowbanks. All right, so moving along then, that kind of brings us to about 1960s to the present, and a little bit more of the modern history. Here is a concert poster advertising a concert put on by Other Half and Sons of Champlin in 1967 in Denver. And you can see for the poster they used, they have a mushroom cloud here, and then probably some type of psychedelic mushroom there. So, you know, clearly mushrooms were part of the culture of Colorado, and you know, people were receptive to you know, advertisements showing mushrooms and things like that. You know, mushrooms have also occupied the imaginations of people. This was like during the Cold War, 80s and 90s. Of course, the mushroom cloud kind of loomed large in many people's minds, and so, you know, there was some concern among people in Colorado about, for example, the Rocky Flats nuclear facility in Jefferson County. So these are a couple of artifacts from the Rocky Flats Cold War Museum, you know, urging peace over nuclear war. And I like this t-shirt, "Some mushrooms will kill you," you know, the mushroom cloud. And then here's a photograph from 1991 showing a man and a woman named Jack and Novella showing off their mushroom harvest. These look like some really choice boletes. And this photo was actually collected as part of the Italians of Colorado history project. So a lot of Colorado's history with mushrooms is intertwined with the immigrant stories too. So immigrants and families of immigrants who made Colorado their home often brought this tradition of mushroom foraging with them and took it into the mountains here. You know, especially Italian, Eastern European, and Asian immigrants where mushrooms are a big part of those cultures. Here is legendary Colorado photographer John Fielder also displaying an interest in mushrooms. These are a couple of his photographs. So an Amanita muscaria, and then this is probably a porcini or a bolete with the water bottle for scale. You can see how big they can get, and even bigger than that. Mushrooms have also had a significant influence and inspiration on architecture of Colorado. So here is the Boulder Mushroom House, officially called the Brenton House, but it was designed by Charles Hartling in 1969. Clearly, you know, he was inspired by mushrooms. That looks really cool. People weren't just inspired by the shape of mushrooms, but also by some of the effects that some certain mushrooms may have had on them too. So for example, architect Andre Ulrich built the Magic Mushroom House in Aspen in the 70s, reportedly while gaining inspiration while he was under the influence of psychedelic mushrooms. So as I mentioned, the savory mushroom farm was a big part of the Colorado mushroom economy, but that closed in 1953, but mushrooms have remained a big part of the Colorado economy. So this was the Colorado Mushroom Farm, also called the Rockra Mushroom Farm, and this was established in 1985 in Alamosa. And at its peak, it employed as many as 260 employees and produced about 6 million pounds of mushrooms per year. Again, they mostly grew the Agaricus bisporus, button, portobello mushrooms. And unfortunately, though, this farm closed in 2022 and has not reopened. But here are some cool photos from there. Here's a worker packaging up some mushrooms. Here's sort of a sample of the variety they offer with some mountains in the background. There's some striking similarities between the Colorado Mushroom Farm operation and the Savory Mushroom Farm operation, if you recall from those previous photos. You know, these sort of structures are very similar. So, you know, 100 years later, not too much has changed.
When did you say it closed?
This one closed in 2022.
Okay.
But if you ate mushrooms in Colorado prior to that, it's likely you had these.
Yeah.
Why did they close?
I think there were some issues, you know, through COVID, and then I I think there were some labor disputes as well.
They used to import Guatemalan workers
Mhm.
because the space where they had to work was so small.
Mhm.
So there was a big Guatemalan community in Alamosa.
Okay, yeah,
That was there.
yeah, right.
So they had to.
Here's some more photos of the operations. You know, manure, substrate, you know, still very similar to the savory mushroom farm photographs. It's pretty striking actually how similar a lot of it was. And although, you know, those large farms may have closed, sorry, I don't know why the images aren't loading. There they go. But there are, to this day, there are probably dozens of smaller, you know, independent mushroom farms throughout the Denver Front Range, even, you know, in all across Western Colorado. I mean, there's probably dozens. So here's just a small sample. This one is a photo from a Hazeldell mushroom farm in Fort Collins. And here's former Broncos quarterback Jake Plummer at Michael Love Farm in Fort Lupton. So you can see, you know, Colorado, Broncos, mushrooms, right? It's all wrapped up into one. And then just a little bit north of here, this is the Mystic Mountain mushrooms in Grand Lake. Of course, there are, like I said, dozens more than just those, but if you've ever been to a farmer's market in Denver or anywhere in Colorado, I'm sure you've probably seen all the mushrooms that are available. And just some more of my photos. And now I'll discuss the mushroom clubs we have here in Colorado.
No Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's what I'm assuming it is. Just seconds ago.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I wanted to wait for that one to load because you really need the full experience.
Did you take that picture?
This is called the stinking oyster mushroom because it's pretty foul smelling, but it looks beautiful. All right, so Colorado is home to not one or two, but three NAMA-affiliated mycological societies. So NAMA is the North American Mycological Association, and it sort of represents mycological clubs across North America. And so we have 3 affiliated clubs here in Colorado. And I think that's just really a testament to the interest in mushrooms in Colorado, as well as the fungal diversity we have in the state, that you know, that we can support 3 clubs. So it's really something to be proud of, I think. The Western Colorado Mycological Association is based in Carbondale. It was founded in 2023, and despite you know, the lower population on the western slope, they have 60 to 70 current members and over 150 lifetime members. So they're able to draw a lot of people, a lot of interest in mushrooms. The Pikes Peak Mycological Society is based in Colorado Springs, and it was founded in 1974 by Athalie Lee Barzy. And if these will load, that's her. And the Pikes Peak Mycological Society and the Colorado Mycological Society actually collaborate on a lot of things. Every year we have a joint foray where the clubs meet up, and it's a great social event, meeting people from across the state. And I guess they do some with New Mexico too. You know, they're a little closer to New Mexico than Denver, but it's a great photo of the club there. And then the Colorado Mycological Society. So this is this is society that I lead forays for in the summer. It's actually one of the largest, if not the largest, mycological society or club in the U.S. And it's probably up there in the world too, in terms of size. There are about 2,000 members of the society, and CMS actually does more forays than nearly any other club in the U.S. as well. During the summer, when conditions permit, we try and do 3 forays per week, which is a lot more than most other clubs. And so, what's that?
Where do you do that?
All over. Mostly Front Range. We come up to Clear Creek a lot. I lead a lot of forays in Clear Creek.
But do you do it like in U.S. forest land or BLM
Yeah.
land or?
Yeah, BLM land or Forest Service land.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there are certain regulations around picking mushrooms, for example, in national parks. It kind of depends on park to park, but I think Rocky Mountain National Park, it's not allowed unless you have a special permit. But yeah, I mean, and then occasionally we will do forays on private land if we get permission from the landowner. But for the most part, it's public, Forest Service land.
So you don't need a license or anything like that?
Nope. Yeah. And so it's based in Denver. That's where the meetings are held, but it kind of represents, the majority of the Front Range. Founded in 1964 by Sam Mitchell, Mary Wells, Rosalie Brace, and a number of others. And one really cool thing about CMS is they've hosted the NAMA Annual Foray 4 times. So the NAMA Annual Foray is an annual event put on by the North American Mycological Association where a different location is picked each year. And it's kind of a conference and a foray, so it draws in people from all over the country, mostly the US, but some people from around the world too come to attend this event. And it's really the preeminent mycological event of the year. And the Colorado Mycological Society has hosted that 4 times. Here is one of our past presidents, John Summer, on a foray. And then here is a photo of the Mushroom Fair, which is another great annual event that CMS hosts. Here are just some interesting documents related to the founding of CMS. So, as you can see on the left here, this is kind of the founding sort of charter document. The club kind of more informally formed in 1964, but then kind of more formally organized in 65. But at the time, the North American Mycological Association, NAMA, did not exist. So CMS organized under the People-to-People Committee on Fungi. That later turned into NAMA, but CMS actually predates NAMA itself. And then here is also from the fairly early days, 1980. Here's just a photograph of the board sitting down to discuss some important business. Here are a couple photographs from a foray that CMS held in 1969. Unfortunately, I don't know where this is held, but most likely somewhere in the Front Range, possibly even Clear Creek County. And as you can see, they've got their cardboard boxes, and they're looking at the mushrooms they found. Couple images that didn't load on this one, I guess. Forward? Maybe they'll load while I'm talking about it. But CMS, by the way, when I say CMS, it's Colorado Mycological Society. Sorry if that wasn't clear. CMS has been really in the news and at the forefront of a lot of people in Colorado for ever since its founding. Really. These are a selection of newspaper clippings from the 80s and 90s. So you can tell the society and mushrooms in general have really been quite popular and part of Colorado's culture for, 60 plus years now. CMS at least 60 years, and mushrooms well before that. So I mentioned the annual fair that CMS puts on. Here are some early flyers advertising the fair. A couple of these note admission fee $1, $2, and going up I think $4. I guess inflation, during the 70s. But it's free now. It's actually free and open to the public. The first fair was held in 1975, and that was organized by, primarily by a man named Manny Saltzman, who was really foundational in organizing CMS, as well as the Telluride Mushroom Festival, which I'll talk about later. But so this has been going strong since 1975. This year it's on Sunday, August 9th, and like I said, it's free and open to the public. It's at Denver Botanic Gardens, and you can go and see hundreds of mushroom specimens from all around the state. Here's some signage and advertisement in the newspaper for the fair. I believe that was 1982 or 83. And yeah, I just thought these were some cool signs that someone, spent some time painting and illustrating. Here's a cornucopia full of mushrooms, so. So I mentioned that the Colorado Mycological Society has hosted the NAMA annual foray 4 times now. So here are some clippings from Spores Afield, which is the Colorado Mycological Society's monthly newsletter. These are advertising and just kind of describing all the planning that is going into hosting this major foray event. And it was actually held in near Granby, the YMCA camp up near Winter Park in Granby. So that's where the 1983 NAMA foray was held. I like this clipping from after the foray ended. They cleared a profit of almost $400. So that's pretty good when it comes to mushrooms, which is mostly a volunteer thing. And in fact, H.S. Knighton, the executive director of NAMA, declared the Colorado annual foray was by all odds one of the best one we've ever held, if not the best, in American mycological history. So that's one for the record books. The next time CMS hosted the annual foray was in 1997. This was at Copper Mountain. I thought this graphic was really cool, whoever designed that. It's very, very cool graphic there. And then, again in 2010, CMS hosted the annual foray. This was again in near Granby, the YMCA ranch near Granby. So here's an article in the Mycophile, 2010. Actually, this was a big honor because in 2010, this was NAMA's 50th anniversary. So CMS was honored to host that for 50 years of NAMA's history. And then most recently, CMS hosted the 2021 NAMA foray. This was the year I got into mushrooms, but unfortunately I was in Chicago. I didn't make it to this one, but by all accounts, this was an amazing year. The rains just kept coming and the mushrooms kept popping up. And here are a couple photographs from that event. On the left here is this is Dr. Amy Honan. I'll talk about her a little bit later. She is describing something about a mushroom there. And then this is Andy Wilson. I'll talk about him a little bit more in depth later too, but what he's doing here is actually really important, and one of the main reasons why NAMA has the annual foray is to bring a lot of people interested in mushrooms together in one area and send them all out into the woods, and try and bring back as many different mushrooms as they can. So we really collect a great picture of what mushrooms were fruiting at that time and at that location. And he's sorting through samples of mushrooms that were brought back, and each of these mushroom samples is tagged with a little slip of paper that records things like the date, and the location, and what trees were around, and other information like that to associate with that mushroom. And then these mushrooms will end up getting dehydrated. Most of them will have their DNA extracted and sequenced, and then most of these will actually end up at the Field Museum in Chicago for preservation and future mycological study. Here's just some miscellaneous CMS memorabilia. We've got the logo in a cool sort of postcard printout there. I think this is from 1974, CMS hosted a famous mycologist named Alexander Smith to deliver sort of the keynote address in August. He's a very famous mycologist. He has discovered a lot of mushrooms, and he has many mushrooms named after him. So that was really an honor for CMS to have him as a speaker. And here's a photograph from one of the CMS festivals. And this is Dr. Manny Saltzman, Joanne Saltzman, and Jason Saltzman, who Jason is still involved with CMS. I mentioned Dr. Manny Saltzman was really foundational in organizing the club as well as the Telluride Mushroom Festival. And so here they are showing some examples of mushrooms you can find in the city. So that's an exhibit that has been a regular, frequent reoccurrence at the festival. All right, so now I'll get into the history of some of the mushroom festivals that Colorado has hosted. So Buena Vista used to host the King Boletus Mushroom Festival. Since the mid-90s, a couple of local residents started the festival. Unfortunately, it stopped in 2020 and hasn't revived, but I'm sure it was a blast. There is the Eagle Mushroom Festival. This was started in 2009 by Tom Bonney and Larry Evans. And I've been to this festival. A couple of my photos are not loading, but hopefully they will. And yeah, there they are. So this is Larry Evans, also known as Mushroom Larry. And he's one of the founders of this festival. He lives in Montana now, I think, but he frequently comes back down to Colorado. And you can see the whole town really gets into it with some mushroom cookies, and yeah, it's really a fun event. And last but not least is the Telluride Mushroom Festival. So this actually started in the 1970s as a toxicology conference in Aspen. The audience for that conference was mostly geared toward doctors, medical professionals, and doctors to discuss recent advances in toxicology research and how to prevent and treat mushroom toxicology, intoxication. But in 1981, Manny Saltzman kind of wanted to create more of a wide-ranging mushroom festival, and so the Telluride Mushroom Festival split off from the Aspen Conference, and it moved to Telluride, and it has, he really grew it into what it is today, and what it is today, it attracts well over 1,000 people every year to attend keynote presentations and speeches, and it draws a wide variety of speakers. It has hosted Nobel Prize laureates, anthropologists, doctors, professors, chemists, people famous and well-respected in their fields. And it kind of all culminates into a parade that marches down the main street in Telluride under the banner, and people dress up in mushroom costumes, and there's the Amanita Mobile that drives down the street.
Rolls down the street.
It's a lot of fun.
Doesn't really drive anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of broken. They're fundraising to fix it so it can drive
They just
again.
push it down
But yeah, it's just kind of pushed. Here are a couple of, sort of miscellaneous memorabilia again. So this is an article in maybe the Denver Post, I think. Mushroom Madness sweeps the four corners. This is from the year 2000. 3 towns sprouting festivals for fungi lovers later this month. And then here's a brochure advertising the 8th Annual Rocky Mountain Mushroom Conference. This is the toxicology conference that the Telluride Festival split off from. It's from 1981. I think that was maybe one of the last years that this conference happened. But as you can see, the focus is on poison treatment and microscopy and mushroom ID. So a little bit more scientific focus. Whereas the Telluride Mushroom Festival, the focus was a little bit broader and focused on some more of the culinary and cultural aspects of mushrooms. And this is from '86. It's I believe the 5th Telluride Festival. All right, so then bringing us into the very recent and modern history of mushrooms in Colorado. You're probably aware of some of the groundbreaking legislation that has taken place in the state. Referring, of course, to psilocybin legalization. So in May 2019, there was partial decriminalization. Denver became the first city in the U.S. to decriminalize psilocybin. And then in November 2022, the state voters in the state passed Proposition 122, which actually decriminalized most natural medicines, full decriminalization of psilocybin, psilocin, DMT, ibogaine, and mescaline for people 21 and older. And of course also legalized the healing centers for if people want to take psychedelics under medical supervision. Here is a photograph of a psilocybin-containing mushroom that occurs naturally in the wild in Colorado. It's called Psilocybe asdicorum, and this is my photograph. You can kind of see, if you're familiar, there's a little bit of bluing, a little bit of blue staining on the cap of the mushroom, which is generally indicative of psilocybin. And then here's the psilocybin molecule.
What's the scale on your image there? How big? How tall?
Let's see. So this cap here is probably has a diameter of 2 to maybe 3 inches. Yeah, and so this is maybe 3 inches tall. Maybe even 4 inches. These were pretty sizable. So the legalization and decriminalization was in 2019, 2022, and even more recently, though, last year, Colorado actually got an official state mushroom. So this was the bill, House Bill 251091. This was passed and signed into law at the end of March last year, took effect in August last year, and we are now the 8th state to designate a state mushroom. And if you go to the Colorado state website, you can see a list of all the official state symbols and emblems. And so there's the state mushroom is the emperor mushroom, or the scientific name is Agaricus julius. And you can see it's up there with, the columbine is a state flower, and there it is. So, and it was a joint effort, a big committee, effort. I was actually involved with it. So we brought together the three main clubs, the Western Colorado Mycological Association, Pikes Peak, as well as the Colorado Mycological Society, and some formally trained mycologists and a few other people together in this committee to push this over the finish line. Greg here also was hugely instrumental in it, so yeah, that was really exciting.
So was it chosen because it's really common, or?
Yes, sorry. So yes, it's not really common, but it's rather common. It grows in the mountains, typically under blue spruce, which is another one of our state symbols. And it's edible. It's closely related to the portobello mushroom. It's in the same genus, but it actually is far superior in taste. And it occurs in the wild, and if you can find it, it's really a joy to find. And it's a joy to eat too.
Why did you choose that one?
Well, initially we were considering a number of different mushrooms, and we solicited some public input about the different mushrooms and which should be chosen to advance. One of the public input methods we did was a poll. We put out a poll to CMS members and the public in general. A lot of people ended up choosing the Boleus rubriceps, or the bolete, or the porcini, and the chanterelle. But we ended up going with this one because those other two options had already been chosen by other states as their state mushroom. So Utah has the porcini as their state mushroom, and I believe California, I think, may have chosen a chanterelle as their state mushroom. So we wanted something to be a little bit more unique, but also edible, and something that, I think the fact that it grows typically under blue spruce was a big selling point too, because that's another one of Colorado state symbols. So there were quite a few criteria that we considered when we decided to select Agaricus julius. And if you're interested, there's a blog post on the Denver Botanic Gardens blog that describes a little bit more in detail how it was chosen and why, and the process. And a few more of my mushroom photographs. These ones are always really fun to find. Little purple spindles sticking up out of the ground.
They're all in Clear Creek?
Well, no, these are not all in Clear Creek. See, these were, I think these were in Summit County, but I found them in Clear Creek County. And I think maybe these were, but all but maybe this one can be found in Clear Creek County. This one is more common in southern Colorado in the Four Corners region. It's a little bit rarer to find around here. And now I'll talk about some of the mycologists and some of the mycology research that is going on in Colorado. So one project that's going on is called the Cold Fire Project, and this is led by a man named Jeff Ravage. This is him, and it's actually a very cool project. So he's using fungi for forest restoration and remediation, specifically using fungi to accelerate the decay of post-logging debris into a fire-safe and nutrient-rich compost. So basically, trying to prevent fuel from being used for forest fires. And the first project, which is shown here, took place on Berrien Mountain, which is just an evergreen very close to us. And so this is really kind of pretty groundbreaking research, and will be certainly important going forward as the West continues to experience forest fires. So this is some really cool research going on. Another project that's ongoing, which I find really cool, is the Rocky Mountain Rare Fungi Challenge. This is sponsored by the Fungal Diversity Survey, and what it is basically is there's this list of 20 species of mushrooms that are rare, underdocumented, and/or threatened. And the challenge is basically for everyday people interested in mushrooms, to go out and try and find these species, and to document them and collect them for further research. So part of the issue right now with mycology and mycological research is all mushrooms and all fungi are really severely underdocumented, especially compared to plants and animals. So really right now, a lot of the focus is just on establishing a baseline for the presence and the occurrence of these species, and then being able to build the research on top of that. But we need that foundational base layer first, and so this helps with that. And these species occur throughout the Rocky Mountains. Some of them are more common in the northern Rockies, Montana, Idaho, but I believe almost all of these can be found and have been found in Colorado. Nearly all of them, I believe. Some of the mycologists that call Colorado home or have done research in Colorado include Dr. Alicia Quant. She's an associate professor at CU Boulder, and her research focuses on fungal genetics and discovering locations that may potentially contain unknown fungal diversity, such as Antarctica and geothermal, underwater marine fungi. Dr. Amy Honan is an instructor of mycology at Oregon State University. Her research focuses on documenting and preserving fungal biodiversity. So she's heavily involved in the Rocky Mountain Rare Fungi Challenge. Dr. Vera Evanson was the very first curator and now has the title of Emeritus Curator of Mycology of the Sam Mitchell Herbarium of Fungi at Denver Botanic Gardens. And last but not least, Dr. Andy Wilson. I mentioned him before. He's in charge of the North American Mycological Association's voucher program. So at each NAMA annual foray, he leads the efforts there to preserve the mushrooms that are found and collected. And he's also associate curator of mycology at the Sam Mitchell Herbarium of Fungi. And last but not least, Dr. Dwayne Sam Mitchell. Sam Mitchell was really a pioneer of Colorado mycology. He was born in Kansas in 1917. He went to medical school and moved to Denver in 1949. And in the 60s, he set up a summer clinic in Central City, serving as a physician to the opera singers at the Central City Opera House. So it's very likely he got into mushrooms and found mushrooms right here in Clear Creek County. And it was in the 60s when he really began researching mushrooms. 1964, he helped co-found the Colorado Mycological Society, and in 1975, he helped co-found the Aspen Mushroom Conference. So, like I said, he was a pioneer of Colorado mycology. Many of the first collections of mushrooms ever made in the state were made by him, and he pioneered a lot of the research and identification and description of species that we have in Colorado. And of course, he's the namesake of the Sam Mitchell Herbarium of Fungi. This is a collection of dried and preserved samples of fungi at the Denver Botanic Gardens. It's the world's largest collection of macrofungi from Colorado and the Southern Rockies. The collection has about over 24,000 species of fungi. Almost 80% of those are from Colorado. The rest, making up the remainder of that, are from Montana and Idaho, New Mexico, so the Rockies. And the collection has almost 3,000 unique species and 55 at least 55 type specimens, which are the specimens that are collected when a new species is first identified and described. So typically that species, that exact organism is collected and preserved, and so in the future, further studies can be done on it, and if there are any corrections that need to be made or anything from that type specimen, then they can be made. And then many Coloradans have contributed to mycological literature as well. And those are mostly field guides and books. I'll wait for them to load. So, but I have actually a majority of them in the back table. You're welcome to take a look after the presentation and peruse through them. And while we're on the subject too, I also have some samples of mushrooms back there that you can pick up and touch and play with. So a couple of them have loaded. So 1966, Colorado mushrooms. This was written by, I believe, Sam Mitchell and Mary Wells, and that was really the first field guide dedicated to mushrooms in Colorado. And then 1997, and you can see quite a flurry of activity in the 2010s, and then kind of corresponding with the general interest and mushrooming of interest in mushrooms throughout Colorado and the U.S. during that time. But these are all excellent field guides. I mean, you know, these might be a little outdated, even that one maybe a little bit at this point. But they're all great resources, and in fact, I had the privilege of being able to contribute to this Falcon Guides, Foraging Mushrooms of the Rocky Mountains, that came out 2 years ago. I wrote a small chapter for it and contributed some photographs. I have that one in the back too if you're interested. So this brings us now to the present and looking into the future. Colorado clearly has a mushroom state of mind.
Hey.
Given the rich history and the fascination with fungi that the people of Colorado have, you know, we should be asking, what does the future hold for mushrooms in Colorado? And you know, it's hard to know, as this winter demonstrates. It was the worst winter on record, and that impacts obviously the snowpack, which negatively impacts mushrooms and their survival. So it's likely that, you know, drought conditions will probably persist in the state and may even get worse. You know, we have data centers and increased water usage, climate change. All these things are concerning when it comes to mushrooms, which depend on water, as all life does. So, you know, it may be an uphill battle, but I think it's worth fighting for. And maybe even one day we can have a Clear Creek County Mushroom Festival. Maybe a mushroom farm, you know, may open here. Maybe even Clear Creek County can host the NAMA annual foray one year. And so here's just a sample of some mushrooms from around the county. And just a quick shout out to my friend John Sprunger. You all, or many of you probably attended his talk last year. Yeah, he's you know, bringing the mushroom interest to Clear Creek County and keeping it going. And I'm happy to help with that as well. So thanks everyone. Happy to answer any questions you might have. And hope you enjoyed learning about the history of mushrooms in Colorado.
Do mushrooms come back the same place? In other words, if you know there's can't say a flock, or there are a lot of...
A flush.
A flush,
That's
okay.
what it's called, yeah.
If there's a flush of morels one place, will they come back the next year?
Yes. You know, it all depends on the conditions, and mushrooms and fungi can be pretty fickle.
Mm-hmm.
You might think the conditions are identical to last year when you found them, but maybe the mycelium disagrees, so maybe they didn't send up any mushrooms that year. But typically, they are you know, the mycelium underground is rather stationary. It does travel and branch out, but typically it'll send up flushes in the same general vicinity year after year.
How do you organize a foray? How do you know you're gonna find anything? I mean, you just sort of,
Yeah.
well, it's gonna rain on Saturday, so we should go on Sunday? I mean,
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So when it comes to rain, the rule of thumb is generally you want to wait about a week after a good rain
Okay.
for at least some of the larger mushrooms to start coming up. Smaller mushrooms and mushrooms that are on little twigs and branches, they may come up sooner, maybe the day after a rain. But yeah, so you know, using maybe about a week sort of time frame, and then, you know, the Mycological Society has kind of a list of locations that tend to be pretty fruitful, even on dry years, where we can bring people, so that we can guarantee at least some mushrooms will be found. Yeah.
When a mushroom releases its spores, how far do they go before it? I guess it depends on the wind and whatever
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, great question. I mean, they can travel extremely far. I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I mean, miles probably, especially, you know, a lot of mushrooms come up next to streams, right? That stream can take the spore downstream as far as it goes.
And what are the sizes of the spores?
The spores, yeah, they are pretty much only microscopic. You can really only see them from a microscope. Some mushrooms have larger spores that can be very faintly visible with the naked eye. If you have something like a background that provides contrast, it might be easier to see them. But typically, especially when you're using spores to identify the mushroom, you need a microscope.
The most spores I've ever seen come out of a mushroom was a puffball.
Yes. Yes, and so puffballs can create trillions of spores in a single puffball mushroom.
Single puff.
Yeah, so the inside of it is solid and fleshy early in its life, and that's when you want to eat it. But if you miss that window of opportunity, the inside turns into spores, and it just, you know, eventually it explodes outward, and yeah, trillions of spores can be created.
When I first moved here about 50 years ago, there were two sorts of things that people talked about. One was they would know where they like to go fly fishing, and that was a secret. I mean, it was just kept quiet. And the same with, well, mushrooms, I don't know that was as much kept quiet, but there was and probably still are in many, many places, the groups that just go out and
Yes.
harvest mushrooms different places and find it. And I assume that's the same. So do they have lots of mushrooms like in Nebraska? And
Yeah.
Kansas?
Well, so a lot of mushrooms form what's called a mycorrhizal relationship with certain trees. And so, as I mentioned, the mycelium largely exists underground. And, you know, you can imagine it's this root-like, very branching structure. And many mushrooms form pretty complex and intricate relationships with tree roots. So the mycelium will sometimes grow around the ends of the tree roots. Sometimes they will actually mesh together and grow. The cellular structure will actually merge between the tree and the mushroom. And they exchange nutrients that way. So a lot of mushrooms, certain species of mushrooms, won't actually exist unless there's a tree of a particular type in that area. So, for example, the porcini or the bolete typically only grows in association with like Engelmann spruce trees. Chanterelles too often grow in association with spruce trees. So the specific type of tree matters a lot too when it comes to mushrooms. So tree identification is important too when you're looking for mushrooms.
I just think you see so much, and one of the reasons I enjoy a lot of the programs we've done of late is there are things you will see just walking down the road that I would never even notice. And so this is fun. You know, those are in Clear Creek. I've never seen these, so thank you for giving us a better set of things to look for.
So if I
course,
wanted to grow chanterelles in my backyard, I wouldn't be able to just do that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Certain species.
Go ahead and try it. I'll keep an eye on it.
Exactly. There's a reason when you go to a farmer's market, you probably see, oyster mushrooms and, enoki mushrooms, maybe a few other species. Those are the ones that are easy to cultivate.
Okay.
And then, in my opinion, the really delicious wild mushrooms, people are working on trying to cultivate them, but as far as I know, there hasn't been much success with a lot of them. Yeah, so it's just, we still haven't uncovered the mystery, I guess, of what makes them grow. Yeah.
Predators, I mean, are there certain animals that seek mushrooms to eat, or
Oh,
is
yeah.
it just humans?
Definitely, yep. I have seen squirrels eating mushrooms, deer, elk, bears eat mushrooms. In fact, certain mushrooms, particularly truffle-like mushrooms, they've evolved. Truffles grow underground, right? They don't actually send up the mushroom body above ground. And so they've evolved to the aroma, the truffle aroma actually attracts like squirrels and other animals to dig up the mushroom and bite off chunks of it and spread the spores that way. So different mushrooms have evolved different evolutionary strategies for spreading spores, and some actually require intervention from animals to spread the spores.
What about
To the animal
pigs are
species?
supposed to find troubles? Or is that true?
Yeah.
They use pigs to
They use
Oh
find-
yeah. Pigs and dogs can be trained to find truffles because they're also, they have very heightened sense of smell, just as a squirrel does. Yeah.
Through the feces, like the squirrel's feces, that help spread the spores?
I don't know if any specific studies have actually studied that question, but I imagine so. A lot of spores do have pretty protective structures sort of around the spores to protect it while passing through like a digestive tract. So I imagine that very well could be a method of just dispersal. Yeah.
How common are truffle type truffles
Mhm.
here in Colorado?
Yeah, so as far as I know, we don't have any culinary truffles,
Okay.
truffles that you'd probably want to eat, but we do have plenty of other truffle-like mushrooms that exist and basically grow totally underground. And I've seen squirrels digging them up. I've seen little holes where squirrels have smelled them and tried to dig them up. So yeah. I think you had a question back there. Yeah.
I was wondering when spores are released and they dissipate, do they have to land on mycelium in order to become a new mushroom, or can they land anywhere in creating a mushroom?
It's more the latter. I know that sometimes if spores do land where there's existing mycelium, they can kind of germinate in those situations too. But for the most part, it's the dispersal is intended for the spore to seek entirely new sort of habitat. And if it's conducive to the growth of the mycelium, it will. Yeah. Yep.
When people are preserving mushrooms to save them for future genetic research.
Yeah.
Like my general observation about mushrooms is if they sit around too long, they kind of dry up and almost disappear. So,
Right.
do they have to treat them with some kind of humidity or something to keep them from
No.
vanishing, or do you know anything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, the Sam Mitchell Herbarium of Fungi at the Denver Botanic Gardens, I volunteer there to identify some of the mushrooms that people bring in. A lot of the mushrooms that end up there are from the Telluride Mushroom Festival. And there's a huge backlog of mushrooms that we're still working through to identify. But basically, the intent is actually to completely dehydrate them, because if they're not fully dehydrated, they will start to rot, and so they have to be fully dehydrated, and then they're dehydrated and then put into a freezer, and the freezer kills any microbes or insects that may have survived the dehydration process, because there are some that can survive that. The freezer will kill them, and then they're safe to be stored for long-term storage. And so typically, many of the features can be seen in the dehydrated specimen, but a lot of times we rely on the contemporaneous photographs that were taken of the mushroom when it was fresh. And then if we need to do microscopy to do further identification, we can scrape off some of the gill tissue and look at that under the microscope and look at the spores and some of the other tissue structure. Occasionally that does need to be rehydrated, and that can be done with alcohol, but we would only do that for a very small portion of the sample. But yeah, so they're fully dehydrated, and mushrooms tend to contain about 90% of their weight in water. So you're right, when you dehydrate them, they can shrivel up to almost nothing. That's 90% of the mass.
I have eaten like canned mushrooms that somebody, I don't know what kind of solution it was in. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't know. My guess is water, probably. Was it? It wasn't water?
Kind of slimy. I
Um,
remember that because when you eat it, it feels like you're eating oysters. They were very good.
yeah. I mean, it's possible that some of the oils from the mushroom may have kind of leached out into the water, maybe. I'm not sure.
We need a talk on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Fly larva that you find in a bolita.
Yes.
What kind of fly is that? And what do they do? Land
Yeah.
on the mushroom and lay their eggs inside the mushroom?
That's a good question. I don't actually know what kind of fly or what species that is. But I believe what actually happens is most that I've found, they seem to come up from the ground and work their way up, I think. But it's certainly possible that some species of flies may land on it and lay eggs, on it. Something I need to look up, I guess.
I have to say thank you to Alex.
Yes.
And say thank you to Alex, and say next year we will look for a class on the different species of flies. And you have materials in back.
Yeah, feel free to take a look at
And if those of you here would take your chairs, help us put the chairs away, we would appreciate it.